Hey, Hanya. 1 second.
Hello.
Hey, Uri, how are you? We're ready to get started. So just a quick thing before we jump in. If you guys want to join the Zoom like Hanya did, in order to just be able to see the live stream, in real time, you could do that. We're gonna focus on specific speakers when they talk. For example, like this, like I just did with Uri. So anytime if you want to jump into Zoom, you can ask Hanya how to do it, and with that, I think we're just going to get started. It looks like, did we lose Colonel Jeff? There we go. For some reason, we're having some trouble getting him up as speaker. It looks like he's speaker right now. Can you hear me, Colonel Jeff? Okay. All right. So with that, let's get started. I want to welcome you guys today to the event, Threat Assessment, Military Movements, Iran, Turkey, and Hezbollah. We're going to get into the latest developments in the Middle East. Hang on 1 second. Just gotta turn off any phone calls. All right. Sorry about that. And we're going to talk about some military activities, strategic moves by Iran, Turkey, and Hezbollah, as well as the United States and Israel. There's a lot of tension in the region, and we're going to try to understand a little bit what's happening. We're very lucky to have a panel of very interesting speakers today. We'll start with Uri. He says he's just an Israeli with opinions, but you and I both know that there's a lot more to this gentleman than he cares to admit. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Uri Kurlianchik. And we have with us as well Colonel Jeff. 1 second, let me see. Colonel Jeff Fish, we're also very privileged to have with us today. Jeffrey Fisher is a retired U.S. Air Force colonel who spent 30 years in the military, including 7 combat tours in key roles at the Pentagon and other locations. After wrapping up his career, senior position at NATO in Belgium, he transitioned to writing. And now he's not only an international security journalist, but also a successful author of military thrillers. And he's been compared to Clive Cussler, who I'm a very big fan of his work. I think my favorite book of his was Sahara. You might have seen his articles in places like The Hill, Politico, and Newsweek. These days, Jeffrey lives in Austria with his family, and you can check out his website at jeffreyhfisher.com and check out his books. Last but not least, we have Andreas with us from Greece. I'm not going to try to say her last name, Andreas, because I don't want to be kicked into a bottomless pit like the Persian emissary in the 300. So I'll just move along and say Andreas is a political scientist and journalist with a deep focus on Middle East and Turkish security and politics. He's all about analyzing the tricky stuff like hybrid warfare, homeland security, any kind of security when it comes to Greece. Andreas has written plenty of articles and papers, and he's a regular interviewee in outlets like Al Arabiya and WION News, Greek news channels, and when it comes to Greek and Turkish relations. So if you want to read about his work, just check out Directus.gr. That's his website. So with that, I think I'm going to hand it over to whoever wants to take it next. What's going on in the Middle East? Is Andreas, Andreas, you want to start?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yeah,
Can you hear me? Okay. Also in YouTube, we're okay?
Oh, should be good, yeah.
Okay. So, about the Middle East.
Excuse me, if I could just interject there for a moment. I do apologize. I want to send greetings to everyone and appreciate this space as it's happening. But I needed to let you know that I am getting messages on the Zoom site where there are a number of people who are saying that they cannot hear anything. And you may know some of those people, Dan. They're, I think, very close to you. And they're all claiming that they can't hear a word. So just
they have to be inside of the. We're all muted on Zoom, so they have to be inside the Twitter space for the audio.
Yes, they claim that they are, but I will ask them then to leave, go into the Twitter space, and then return to Zoom. Are those the correct instructions?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. And again, my sincere apologies for the interruption.
Oh, no worries. That's fine. No big deal. So I think we'll jump back to Andreas. Why don't you get us started? And then I got a question for Colonel Jeff.
Okay, can you hear me? I'm okay?
Yeah, all good.
Okay, thank you all very much. I would like to start, and we spoke about this with Daniel. I want to begin with Turkey's role in this crisis, and we have to discuss about this role of Turkey in this crisis in the Middle East. And we have to show in the whole world how Turkey supports Hamas and how Turkey also supports Muslim Brotherhood. Muslim Brotherhood and Turkey and Hamas is the same, of course, and they are doing provocative actions against Israel the last years, but not only against Israel, but of course against Greece and Cyprus. And we have to see what is happening from 2009, when Erdogan, if you remember, walked out of a panel with Shimon Peres in Davos after accusing the former Israeli president of killing children. Fake news by Turkey, of course. And if you remember, in 2010, a Turkish aid flotilla tried to break the blockade of Gaza, leading to a deadly Israeli raid and years of cold peace between the two countries. We have to see that Erdogan supports Hamas the last 2 decades, and of course support Muslim Brotherhood, as I said before. Erdogan's ideological ties to the global Muslim Brotherhood network, which is they have a lot of roots with Brotherhood from 1970s, and Erdogan has a lot of connections with Muslim Brotherhood the last years. So we have to see what Erdogan tries to do in this conflict. He wants to destabilize the Middle East with these proxy organizations, Hamas and Hezbollah. Don't forget that the leadership of Hamas has a base in Turkey and also in Qatar. Also, Erdogan support Hamas economical and with some weapons. Don't forget that Haniyeh, we had seen Haniyeh a lot of times in Turkey and also in Qatar. So Erdogan ties with Hamas is very big. Also, we have to know that Turkey trying to have closer ties also with not only with Hamas, but also with Mahmoud Abbas. And don't forget that Mahmoud Abbas will be in Turkey in the following days. So Turkey tries and weaponize Hamas in order to destabilize Israel. And Erdogan wants to show in the whole world that is the protector of the Muslim community. But this is fake, because Erdogan is trying to destabilize Israel and the Middle East, and he's trying to show that I'm here for you, and I will protect Muslim world from bad Israelis. So, for Erdogan, it's not secret that he loves Hamas, that support Muslim Brotherhood, and he's trying to make an Islamic network in order to create a new world and an Ottoman Empire in the whole area of the Middle East. And in recent years, also, Turkey is making a lot of provocative statements against Israel, as we know all. Don't remember what Erdogan said before 2 weeks against Israel. He said that I will invade in Israel. Okay, this is bullshit. But we have to see what is the role and what Erdogan want to do in the whole area. And Turkey, with Hamas and Hezbollah, want to destabilize the whole area. Okay, and also with Iran, they want to create a big conflict in the area. But I think that all these plans of Erdogan will stop, because Israel is a very big country. It's very strong, a strong country, and I think that Erdogan will not be able to destabilize the whole area. And also, don't forget to see that before 2 or 3 weeks, Erdogan tried to connect Hamas with Kemal Atatürk. Kemal Atatürk is this guy that established the new Turkey, but Kemal Atatürk made a big genocide against Greece. Okay, and he said that Hamas and Kemal Atatürk is the same, and we will try and we will stand on Hamas, and Hamas for Turkey is a peace organization. Okay, so I believe that, and this is very clear, that Erdogan will try in the next weeks and months to give a lot of money in Hezbollah, in Hamas, and don't forget that also we have a Hezbollah organization in Turkey, and this organization asked from Erdogan to make a big punishment against the Jews of Turkey, because some Jews in Turkey wanted to become a part to fight close to Israeli army against Hamas in Gaza, and this organization, Hezbollah organization, said that we have to kick out Jews by Turkey. So we have to see the big picture, that Turkey is a big threat for the whole world, for Greece, for Israel, for Cyprus. And after I will show you how Turkey want to destabilize Greece and Israel with Hamas and other organizations in the Eastern Mediterranean, in the Middle East. This is my first. This is what I wanted to say about this big crisis.
Thank you so much. Sorry, guys, I was a little bit distracted because I was trying to be able to get everybody on and ready to go. It looks like we had a couple of people drop out of Zoom, but we have them now in the Twitter space, so that's at least the most important part. Although I'm still looking for Uri. I think he dropped off again. But at the risk of being redundant here, because I'm not 100% sure if I heard everything you said while I was trying to get everybody onto the Zoom and Twitter space. Let me ask you this. Everybody's talking about, okay, Erdogan threatened Israel. He wants to attack. What exactly do you feel is the threat that they pose, especially given the fact that Erdogan, for example, threatened that he was going to cut economic ties and like 2 weeks later reestablish them?
Yes, before 2 weeks, I read a very important article in Jerusalem Post. I didn't remember the name of the analyst, and he was former ambassador of Israel in Turkey. And he said, of course, that the provocative statements of Erdogan against Israel that he will invade is bullshit. But he said something very important, that if we have a war between Israel and Hezbollah, maybe Turkey will send troops, maybe in order to support Hezbollah in Lebanon. I think, and you have to see that, because I'm watching every day Erdogan. We have every day provocative actions against Greece by Turkey. Erdogan has some ambitions in the whole area. Also, he's very old. And what means that? That he's very dangerous. I don't think that Erdogan is a very calm guy. Okay, he's very old, and I think that this makes this guy very dangerous. But of course, if he sends troops or he made something against Israel, we can see it's clear that Erdogan, after this, he will have problem. Also, his regime and his state, because all the countries will be against Turkey. But Erdogan, as I said before, he wants to show in the whole Muslim world that I'm here, I will protect you. But don't forget that nobody from the Muslim world respect Turkey, because Ottoman Empire was an empire for a lot of years, and also Middle East was under the rule of Ottoman Empire. So I think Erdogan is making a lot of mistakes, and I believe that at the last that Turkey will not gain something from these provocative actions against Israel or Greece. But we have to stop this, because Muslim Brotherhood, Hamas, and other channels like Al Jazeera are making everyday propaganda against Israel, against Greece, against Cyprus. Also, we have to see that. We have to see the big picture. We have to prevent these provocative actions, okay, and this propaganda against our countries. And I believe that Erdogan maybe will make a big mistake, because if he will continue to support Hezbollah and Hamas, after this, I think that Turkey will have a lot of problems.
Got it. Sorry, my mouse got caught. So I think, was it Hanya that had her hand up, or Maurice? I don't want to dwell too much on Turkey, because we have a bigger issue with Iran, but we have
with this. Yes.
Yeah, but we're lucky to have Colonel Jeff here with us, and I had a question for him about the F-22s that landed in the UK. Considering the fact that they're an air superiority jet and not a multi-role fighter, meaning that they are, for those who need the clarification, the F-22s is a jet that Israel wanted it, but the U.S. is not selling it to anybody, because it's saving it only for its own Air Force. So the question is, with that being said, we have, let me just pull up a picture of this airplane, F-22, so everybody can see. This is the plane. Considering the fact that it's only air-to-air, it's not meant to be used for bombing and those kinds of things. Although I've seen, that they're using now lasers on it or something like that. Maybe you can confirm whether that's being used or not. But the issue here is, since Iran has no Air Force to speak of, it's got old planes, it doesn't really have good pilots, they're not really focused on their Air Force. Who exactly are the F-22s supposed to be mobilized against? What exactly are we looking at? Whose Air Force are they supposed to be used against? Any speculation on that?
Yeah. So, hey, thanks for having me up. And for those who don't know, I'm the problem child. For some reason I can't get my video and my audio to work. It's always the colonel, man. It's always the colonel, right? When I was a young officer, I always blamed everything on the colonel. Now I'm a colonel. I still blame everything on the colonel. But no, you're right. So F-22s are only air-to-air, right? So they perform the air-to-air missions. Offensive counter-air, defensive counter-air, OCA sweeps, these types of missions. They don't do close air support. They don't do interdiction. They're not air-to-ground. So you're right. And I would argue that, bringing F-22s over to England is a show of force. I mean, this is very similar to what Russia's done with bringing warships into Cuba, right? I don't know if they're necessary. I think at this point, it's very hard to try and tie them to a specific mission, whether it be Israel, Iran, whatever. By the way, I would also say that while Israel doesn't have the F-22, it's got F-16s, and it's one of the first nations to get F-35. So their Air Force is quite capable. Their Air Force is not only quite capable, but their Air Force also has, on their F-16s at least, an F-16, for those who aren't really familiar with fighters, an F-16 is almost, it's best to think of it like an iPhone, right? It can do anything, and you can almost slap anything underneath the wing line onto one of these pylons, right? So it's almost like an iPhone in the air. And when you look at Rafael or Elbit, which are Israeli defense systems, they've come up with some extremely unique capabilities to put on the F-16. And Israel, being a nation at war for decades, they know exactly what they need, and they don't speculate. And if they feel they need it, they buy it. So who Israel goes against? It's interesting. I just had a discussion here in Austria with my father-in-law, and he's like, Israel's in trouble because Hezbollah's manpower is ridiculous, and the Lebanese have a massive ground army. I'm like, yeah, but their best airplane in the air is a propeller, right? And I think we all need to remember that trying to compare the long war of the West in Iraq or the long war of the West in Afghanistan, these are insurgencies and counterinsurgencies. These are not conventional wars, right? If you look back to conventional wars, the one that I often cite in 1999, when NATO went against Serbia, NATO didn't put one ground force boot into Serbia and won that war with just air power. So given the fact that Hezbollah has a huge ground force and not so much from an air perspective, they would be in trouble should they really try and do anything or take some kind of offensive against Israel.
Yeah, that makes sense. Speaking of the F-16, I know Israel made modifications to it. They modify everything, but am I correct in saying that the Sufa version of the F-16 has the Delilah missile on it?
And it might. I haven't studied that and I haven't seen it, but if it does, let me put it this way: it wouldn't shock me, right?
Yeah. So, I mean, to clarify, what I meant was there were some people talking about that was the missile that was used on Hania, although that was, I think that was debunked. But the Delilah missile system is one that Israel developed because a lot of people accuse Israel of attacking, Gaza with weapons that are causing mass destruction. And the Delilah system, Israel put so much money into this particular missile just to protect civilians, because what it does is the co-pilot can press a button and recall the missile. So if at the last minute the people on the ground see that there's civilians in the area or something unexpected, then they can cancel the missile, and it just goes back into the air and sort of circulates around the area until it's assigned a new target. So, I mean, I thought that was kind of, when you said the F-16 was jack of all trades, I thought that was kind of an interesting segue to this particular thing. But I kind of went off topic here. Let's get back to what we were talking about. I'm a geek when it comes to military technology, but I'm nowhere near the level of knowledge that you have about especially about American airplanes. So with that, I think Maurice had a question, or did Ace? Maurice has his hand up.
Thanks, Daniel. Like, all I know about Turkey is, there are many years behind in relation to developing a fifth-generation fighter plane. Turkey has the second biggest military in NATO, but just because you have X amount of troops, sure doesn't North Korea have supposedly the largest army in the world? Manpower is irrelevant. If you were talking about 1,000 years ago, yes, but not really. Like, it depends. Like, in my opinion, it's all down to technology. Who has the edge in relation to that? And like, I would be more concerned with Turkey than Iran. I do think that Turkey will attack Israel, but I'm not sure when they will. But if that does happen, in my opinion, like, the Israel and the West, especially many of the European countries that are in NATO, should be looking at arming the Kurds in Syria and also in southeastern Turkey. Because if they're properly armed and if they have the air support that they need, because the Turks will probably try and commit a genocide against the Kurds in retaliation. Like, Turkey would lose a massive chunk of its territory in that war. Similar to when the Ottoman Empire entered the First World War, it was faced towards the end. It was faced with being carved up. Unfortunately, that didn't happen. But it probably if Erdogan is hell bent on attacking Israel, that's, in my opinion, that's what should happen to Turkey when they lose the war. That I believe in a greater Greece. I believe that the Treaty of Sevres should have been implemented. Unfortunately, the British Prime Minister didn't have the support of his cabinet to support the Greeks in the Greco-Turkish War of 1919. But I believe, for instance, that Turkey will attack Israel, and when it does, it should be carved up, because Turkey poses a serious threat to the region and also to Europe and America, because they harbor Hamas, they sponsor terrorists. Like, if you look at the CIA, for instance, when ISIS controlled Syrian oil fields, especially in northeastern Syria, they were selling oil to the Turks at $10 a barrel, to my knowledge. So Turkey is no friend of the West.
Let me actually redirect to Colonel Jeff again, since we're lucky enough to have him with us. He was in NATO in a senior position. How do you feel about Turkey being part of NATO? How do people talk about this particular relationship?
Yeah. So look, Turkey is a necessary evil, right? And I think we all have to be careful, right? Erdogan. I'm not a fan of Erdogan, but I think if you understand that Erdogan is going to do things that are always in the best interest of Turkey, it's a little easier sometimes to consider why he's doing what he's doing. You can't kick someone out of NATO. There's no article that basically says you get to kick someone out of NATO. So I think we have to be careful of that. And the other thing is, back in the early 2000s, 2001 to 2010, 15. Turkey was critically and instrumentally important in NATO because it was the one predominantly Muslim nation in a Western alliance during the global war on terror, which theoretically could have turned into an Islam versus Western war, right? Turkey was kind of the one pseudo-democracy that was there to help us. So there's a lot of people that get frustrated with Turkey's actions. I would argue, though, it's somewhat easier to get frustrated with Turkey's action because they are different. They're not truly European, than it is to get upset with, let's say, Germany's action, right? There's many NATO allies that are frustrated with what Germany does right now and the lack of spending, and that they can't mobilize even a freaking brigade at this point for their own nation, and they've slept under the blanket of security provided by the U.S. taxpayer for the last 20 plus years. You know, France quit NATO and then rejoined again. So it's somehow I think we have to be careful, right? It's pretty easy to pick on Turkey because they're not necessarily the same, and sometimes they have to play intermediary. You know, you keep talking about my time at NATO. I'll give a quick vignette if you'll let me. I was a senior military advisor to the ambassador at OSCE, right? And the OSCE is the Organization for Security and Cooperation in Europe. And this was between 2011 and 2014. And during that time, the U.S. ambassador and the Turkish ambassador every week on Thursday had a meeting. And it wasn't commonplace for the U.S. ambassador to have meetings with bilaterally nations scheduled all the time. But Turkey, right, it was critical to the U.S. government then and now, because Turkey is kind of in the center of a really bad neighborhood. If you look, and sometimes it's easy to look at Turkey and go, I don't understand why they're doing that. That's freaking crazy. But if you're a nation that literally has wars on 80% of your borders, right? You have, and I'm not saying you're at conflict with them, but you've got wars going on in Syria. You've got wars going on in Iraq. You've got wars going on between Lebanon and, you know, so they're just in a really bad neighborhood. So their desire to try and protect themselves is far greater. And I think sometimes when you look at the lens of what Turkey does, it's perhaps a little easier to understand it when you realize that the United States, the U.S. government anyway, realizes they're in a bad neighborhood. I sat in many of these meetings with my ambassador, and you know, I listened to the Turkish ambassador basically complain. And look, Taşan Yıldırım was the name of the ambassador, the Turkish ambassador. He ended up becoming the Deputy Secretary General of NATO. He was very well respected in diplomatic circles, right? So that this guy wasn't some kind of yahoo under Erdogan that was an Erdogan crony. He was extremely brilliant and had a wonderful way of working with the West. So I mean, look, again, there's a lot of things Erdogan does that frustrates me, and yes, they bother me. But I think sometimes perhaps tapping the brakes a little bit and trying to understand what goes on with Turkey is warranted.
Now, do you see, just to follow up on that question, do you see any issues with Turkish expansionism where, for example, they built this massive base in Somalia and they're sort of spreading out into different territories, kind of like Iran is trying to expand its reach as well by bringing in warships into the Mediterranean and trying to open surveillance base in Sudan, things like that. Do you see any issues there or not particularly on your radar?
No, so I'll say this, right? If Turkey has been invited in by that nation, in other words, the leadership has said, we want you to come here, right? They've created a status of forces agreement, a SOFA, just like the United States has with Germany. I find it a little bit hypocritical for Americans to get upset about that when the United States has SOFAs and U.S. forces bedded down in the UK, Germany, Italy, South Korea, Japan. Fuck, I can keep going, right? I mean, look, nations aspire to do things that are in their best interests. I'm completely for, if nations want to partner and they want to bed down other forces there, they should have some level of right to do that. I'm not for nations like, let's say, Russia, who don't decide to have status of forces and basically just trundle their military into other nations. I'm not a big fan of that.
So one quick question to follow up on that. If you had to give a wild guess, what is their purpose in expanding to all these areas? And if you had to compare that to why the U.S. has bases, is the U.S. being expansionist, or is it just being, is it trying to be world police and sort of create security or I don't know how you would call it. I mean, if you're an adversary of the U.S., you would say they're intruding on your territory. If you are an American, you're saying you're trying to to create security in areas that are troubled, like Turkey's, for example?
Yeah, look, Turkey is in a really interesting situation, right? They've got problems with inflation. Their currency is challenged. But that being said, their defense industry is rocking it off the charts, right? I mean, the Bakhtari drones have been a monster win for Ukraine. There's many other nations that are trying to buy Turkish munitions. Turkey has no problem selling anything that they make to almost anybody. And Turkey is in the final phases, and I'm not joking, right? They're in the final phases of building a fourth plus generation fighter jets that will compete with, the F-15, the F-16, the F-18 and stuff like that. And again, they will not have a problem who they sell it to, right? So I realize there's a lot of different feelings about the U.S. military industrial complex. I get that, right? But I would, that there's a large portion of revenue that flows into the United States because while we might be getting our asses kicked by China and other nations on import-export disparities, the one place we're rocking it out of the park is military sales, right, to foreign nations. We're making a shitload of money on that, and we're good at it, right? And we're doing phenomenal. So if Turkey's going to step into that market and start making that kind of money, who knows? Maybe they're making these relationships because they need resources for their stuff. Maybe they are building relationships because they know that nation potentially could be buying their fighter, and they can have long-term contracts. Because the truth of the matter is, the sale of the fighter is one thing, but the long-term contract for parts, supply, maintenance, logistics, and all the support, that money runs long and it runs deep.
Yeah, I didn't say anything.
And do they have? Are they the ones providing the maintenance, support, and training for these kinds, especially like for, did you say they were selling American systems or their own?
No, they're selling. So they make a drone called the Bakhtari drone, right? They sell them to Ukraine, and they sell a lot of other things. So they're selling their own systems, and yes, they will provide for a price. They will provide support and maintenance. They provide the training, right? So there's money in all of this, right?
Got it. Makes sense. Okay. And it looks like Tom has had his hand up for a while, so I'm going to let you ask question.
Hi, Dan. Thanks for pulling me up. Question to the experts about military aircraft specifically. U.S., as far as I know, I'm just a layperson, but from what I understand, U.S. supplied aircraft, also other systems that may be part of other ordnance, requires codes to operate. So, like, let's say, Turkey has U.S. supplied aircraft, and they say, right, we're going to, use our these aircraft to say, attack Israel. Would it be possible to essentially just not give them the codes so they can't fly them? And also, how widespread is the proliferation of U.S. supplied aircraft and or ordnance that is code controlled throughout this conflict region, and what difference could that make? And the second question is, as far as I understand, there's only one other country that can generate codes for these, and that's the UK. And there's obviously some people quite concerned about potential hostile infiltration of the UK government. How do you see? Is there a I would say like some checks and balances in place with regard to the military? Let's say some crazy decision is made by the UK government. They're not going to, cooperate with whatever the efforts are that the Western Alliance would want to do, either not supply codes or supply codes, but the wrong ones. So they only work for a bit and then interfere with it. And where do you see the safeguards against something like that possibly?
That was for
Daniel?
Colonel Jeff?
Okay, all right. I didn't know who that was for. So when we talk about fighter aircraft, right? I've never flown a foreign F-16. I've flown in a U.S. F-16, right? But I don't know about these. And I'm being sincere. I don't know about these codes. What I do know about, right, is when the United States government allows a military company in the U.S. to sell a capability, it has to go through like a foreign military sales. The U.S. Senate Armed Services Committee basically looks at it and says, are we willing to sell that capability to nation X, right? And in many times, the capability is dumbed down, or it's not the full capability, or it's all these types of things. In addition to that, there's third-party control of the weapons, right, or of the systems. So we say, okay, dude, we're going to let you buy this, but you can't use it to do X, Y, and Z. You can't do it to do, so there's rules in place. A perfect example of this from recent lessons is the United States has been, pushing tons of weapons into Ukraine. And the Biden administration has made it very clear that, hey, we're going to place some limits on your use of these weapons for deep strike capability into Russia. We're not going to allow you to do that, right? So those come along. There's no code. There's no, the ATACMS doesn't take off, and once it, its GPS senses that it's, crossing the Russian border, it just self-detonates and blows up. That doesn't happen. So yeah, I'm not familiar with that, but I do know that the United States government will put stipulations and limits on stuff like that. As for the Israelis, it would be hard to believe, knowing that Israel is buying weapons specifically because they're at threat from Iran and from Hezbollah and from Hamas and these others, that there were any limitations whatsoever put on Israel for those countries.
Did that answer your question, Tom?
Yeah, I mean, I was okay. It's good to know that about Israel not having restrictions. I mean, like say Turkey. Does Turkey have U.S. supplied capability that is controlled in some way, or basically as a NATO member, do they have the full access? And then the other question was regarding the UK specifically, because they people are concerned about infiltration and whether there are any safeguards in case there were going to be some over the top, off the rails kind of decision made by the government, that the military in the UK can still serve as sort of a checks and balance function.
Yeah, so weapons to Turkey. I mean, God, we could have a whole freaking space on that, right? I mean, you're opening up on Pandora's box there, right? So, I mean, for a long time, and I already said that between 2001 and 2010, 2011, Turkey was a critical ally of the United States. They helped facilitate the movement of forces in and out of Afghanistan. They flew the United States F-16. They had a lot of United States F-16s, right? They were critical for the bed down of U.S. military assets during the war in Iraq, the second war, Operation Enduring Freedom. And I say all that because in the context, at this time, the United States was an ally, or at least recognized the Kurds, right? The Kurds in northern Iraq and southern Turkey. Turkey did not recognize the Kurds. As a matter of fact, was at war with the Kurds. So while U.S. airplanes may have been taking off out of Incirlik Air Base, right, to go do missions in Iraq, Turkish F-16s were taking off at the same time and bombing Kurds, which were a ally or recognized friend of the United States, right? And there was nothing the United States could really do, right? This is their sovereign territory. It's their base. We are a guest. We might not like it, and we might have some diplomatic tensions that will lead to this, but we will, and at the end of the day, if we stop providing them parts for their F-16s, then they'll just say, okay, then no F-16 parts come in for yours, right? So these are the diplomatic games that happen between nations. This shouldn't be a shock to anyone. If it is, and you find these things exciting, please go buy my books because there's tons of examples in them, right? where you'll find crazy stuff between nations. But Tom, a little bit more recent to your point. Look, Turkey bought the S-400, and the United States said, if you buy a Russian S-400 surface-to-air missile system, we're going to kick you out of the F-35 program, and they did, right? And the United States and the partners of the F-35 said, okay, here's your money back for the F-35s. You're not going to have the F-35 anymore, right? So at some point, that the pressure and the diplomatic tension becomes too much, and it snaps, and at that point there's some kind of action done. Hopefully that kind of squares the corner on that for you.
Now, when you have Turkey threatening close U.S. allies like Greece, like Israel, like Cyprus, how does the U.S. feel about this with respect to NATO and them being part of it?
Can I speak, Daniel?
Of course.
Can you hear me? Okay.
Yes, and then if we can get back to Colonel Jeff about that.
Yes. You have to know, first of all, Turkey is a member of NATO, okay? But every day, the last years, Turkey violates Greek airspace with Turkey's F-16s. We have every day, not at the last 1 year, but we had before 2 years, every day, overflights above Greek islands, okay, every day. Also, we have provocative actions against Cyprus. We have to know that Cyprus, who is a member of the European Union, is divided. The north place of Cyprus is from Turkey, okay. We had an invasion by Turkey in 1974. And at the same time, Turkey is a member of NATO, and we have provocative actions against Greece. Also, you have to know that the United States made a big mistake, because before 3 months, as you remember, they gave the green light to Turkey to have new F-16 fighter jets and F-16 Vipers. Greece has F-16 Vipers. Also, okay, the United States gave to Greece F-35, but why we give to Turkey this fighter jets? This fighter jets is used against Greece and against, as we said before, against Kurdish people. And also, as we know, before 2 weeks, I wrote an article in a website of Reuters, and they revealed there that Turkey asked from NATO, by NATO, not to have big cooperation with Israel. Okay, Turkey is a terror state, and Turkey, I think, this is my opinion, that we have to kick out Turkey by NATO. It's a big threat for peace. It's a big threat for our area. Turkey has very good relations with Russia, with Iran, with China, and of course, they give weapons and money, a lot of money in Hamas. Okay, so we have to kick out Turkey by NATO. Turkey, as I said before, and we have to say this in the whole world, Turkey is threatening Greece with war. It's casus belli. Turkey threatens Greece with war, and we have to stop this. And I think that Greece and Israel and other states that we want peace in this area, we have to stop Turkey, because it's a terror state. It's a pirate country, and Erdogan is a big threat for our peace and for our area. Thank you.